Hi, this is Kay with Girl Meets Meeple, and today I'm doing something a little different. This is part one of a series I am starting on gaming with young children. Older children can play mini games, but younger children, it can be really hard to figure out what to play with them. So, as I am a gamer with very young children, I have a 5 and a 2-year-old, almost 3-year-old, I thought I would talk about some of our favorite games as a family and what we play and why we play them, and give you some insight on the I can only play this game so many times before it's going to drive me mad versus this is a fun game I enjoy playing and would play it again scale. So in this part one series, we will be looking at the youngest gamers. These games are aimed at toddlers and gamers who have maybe never sat down in front of a game at all and are very young. Now, when you first start playing with a toddler, they don't understand games at all. So the very first thing they have to learn is things like taking turns and the physicality of rolling a die, which doesn't sound hard, but a lot of times they chuck it overhanded and it takes a while to teach them, no, just toss it in front of you. This is actually a pretty big lesson, or at least it has been in my house, especially with my youngest. He is definitely a chucker still. Another lesson with die in particular is that it's going to be random and you can't choose what you want and put it down. So these are things they need to learn. So games that teach things like we all have to wait our turn. I go and then you go and then Sissy goes, these are things a child has to learn. So for those very first games, I highly suggest the HABA My First Game line. Yeah, it's right there in the title. And they do say they are 2+. And these are not all of them. There are lots and lots of these games, but these are our favorites. We have quite a few more, but these are the ones I really recommend. So depending on your child, you may be starting them at 2 with this. You may be starting them a little younger if they're getting really interested in trying to steal your game pieces while you are playing. Or you may be starting them a little later. These games will last for a little while, not a whole long time. I wouldn't recommend pulling these out for a 7-year-old. I don't think it will hold their attention. But that 2 to 4 range, this is probably a good place to start if they've never touched a board game at all before. So you have things like My First Flower Fairy, which is a cooperative game. Again, it's teaching that turns, it's teaching how to roll a die. This one actually teaches how to go down a path, though the players do not go down it, the fairy does, because the players have to build these flowers before the fairy reaches them. My First Orchard is another cooperative game. In My First Orchard, you are again rolling that die to determine which fruit you can take, and you are trying to gather all the fruit in the orchard before a bird gets down the path to the orchard door. So this one is not a cooperative game, it is a competitive game, sort of, but in it you are rolling a die, you try to fish, there's a little magnet in here, and you try to fish for the animal that is the color that you rolled. If you successfully get that fish, you get a token of that color to add to your sheet, and the first one who finishes their sheet wins the game. In all of these games, there's almost no player agency. But at this age, that is actually a good thing. I will not say that in the rest of this series, but in the very youngest group, having to make choices can make learning things like taking turns and the attention span it takes just to play a game from start to finish. And these are all very short games. You're talking 5 to at most probably 15 minutes, depending on how focused your child is. But typically it's in the 5 to 10 range. And that is about as long as a young child can concentrate typically. So that's good. But there's no player agency. There's very little choice. There is a random on all of these in which you can choose which item you take, but otherwise there is no choice. You get what you rolled. But in this game that works. What I like about all of these games is they have big chunky pieces that are great for very small hands. They're very colorful. They're not only teaching this taking turns, rolling die, that kind of thing, but there's also some colors that they're learning. So in all of these, you take the red apples or the green pears. You're taking, the purple fish. You get to place the blue flower, things like that. So for young children, the fact that it has some educational value as well as learning the way that games are played is great. So I highly recommend the Haba My First Games as a first game for any child. I could probably actually fill an entire top 5 list with Haba games alone, but I'm going to try not to do that. So next up on the list, we have Feed the Wuzzle, or Woozle. I think it's Woozle. Feed the Woozle. I usually just call him Feed the Monster. So in this game, this is a physical game. You are going to set this little cardboard stand up at one corner of the room. You will move back however far you feel like. There is a die to roll that will have 1, 2, or 3 on it. The child will roll that. They will take that many of these silly little tokens that say things like sand pizza and worm pie and other silly things that monsters would eat. They load the number they rolled up onto the spoon, this huge giant plastic spoon that comes in here, and they walk across the room and try to dump it into the monster's mouth. Woozle. We call it a monster in my house. And that is as simple as it can be for a very young child. And you can play just that way, or you can add complexity. I like this game in that it has different levels. There is also a spinner that comes with it that for older children, now they have to spin that after they get their spoon loaded up, and they'll have to do things like spin in circles or walk backwards to get to the woozle. And then even higher up on that list, they do all these things with their eyes closed. So you can add some complexity to make this game last for more ages. Also, theoretically, there's a penalty if they drop the food that they're trying to feed the monster. I guess it turns to dust and he won't eat it if it hits the floor, despite the fact that it is sand pizza already. But, monsters can have their options. So you want to feed him all the food without getting so many of these little tokens. We usually, especially at the younger age, do not use that rule because just getting them to walk without holding onto it is a challenge in and of itself. This is often a game that I let them play on their own if I do not want to run across a room. My oldest was little. I did have to play so that she would understand. Now she plays with my youngest and I'm usually there to supervise. But this is a fun game that has just that dexterity element that is good for development, everything from learning to balance to the hand-eye coordination of putting this spoon inside the monster's mouth and tipping it is good for a small child. And then of course, all the other things once they start adding it in when they're bigger, like spinning and learning how their bodies move and what that does with the things they're holding. All good lessons to have for small children. So, and again, taking turns. All of these games are going to teach taking turns, which is the very first thing a small child has to learn to play a game successfully. So, good game. Feed the Woozle. I highly recommend it. Next up on the list is Spot It, in particular Spot It Junior for this age group. There are a lot of Spot Its that will go through a lot of ages, but for little ones, Spot It Junior is great. We do not play this competitively in my house. This is the type of game I tend to throw in my purse and pull out at restaurants. Well, not currently, obviously, but when you are somewhere and you have to wait, it's a great thing to put on the table and just put in front of a child and let them find the thing that matches. And that skill of matching is a lot of fun for them and just good practice. So Spot It Junior is a fun little game, and of course when they get a little bit older it can be played competitively, but at a toddler age just naming all the animals is enough sometimes, and figuring out this matches that is an important skill. Next up, this one is just a fun game. I threw this on the list because this is my 2, almost 3-year-old's favorite game right now. He asked to play this a lot. It has great table presence, great toy presence. You roll a die. It tells you what color hamburger to pick. The hamburgers are all bun side up, I guess, top bun side up, which gives you the color. You pick it up, you flip it over, it has a number on the back. You push the hat that many times and feed the pig the hamburger. And the goal is you want to be the person who makes his tummy expand to the point that his clothes pop open, and you, that sounds terrible, but he busts his buttons and you popped the pig. It's silly, it's ridiculous, and both of my kids actually love this game. I enjoy that it teaches some counting. My 2-year-old can very easily count to 4, which are the numbers that are in this game, 1 to 4, and he is doing very well at recognizing the numbers. He doesn't have them all. He's very good at the number 2. He usually can figure out 1. 4, I think, is a process of elimination. 3 he struggles with because I think the curves look too much like 2. But I love that he is figuring it out, and it's just because anytime he flips it over, the first thing I do is ask him, what number did he get? And he looks at it and he thinks about it, and that's important. And if I'll tell him if he doesn't know automatically, and then he pushes the hat down and he counts to the number. So it's reinforcing some colors, it's reinforcing numbers 1 through 4. So while it's silly and it does get old pretty fast if he wants to play it more than once in a row, it's cute and it does teach him stuff. So I will recommend Pop the Pig as a cute game, and there are lots of games you can say that with. They are cute, they teach a couple numbers, and it's really a matter of what appeals to your family and how often you can play it without wanting to run and hide in your room. So, Pop the Pig, it's cute. Now, this last one is actually a step-up game, and that is Unicorn Glitter Luck. Most of these other games have been focused more on very basic things. You don't think about how hard following a path is until you try to play with a toddler. So I would not start with a game with a path like this where the toddler has to follow that path. But once they have started to get really good at these other games, this is a good step up. It is actually the same level as Candyland. Candyland is actually also a good game for this spot. I don't want to put it there because I actually abhor this game. I hate playing Candyland and Chutes and Ladders. I just don't want to play them, and a lot of that has to do with the fact there's no player agency, and they can take too long if you end up getting sent back towards the beginning. But they actually, games like this have a very important role, and that is children learning. If I roll a 2, I count the one before where I am and the next one, and that's how I move, and I have to go this way down the path. And Glitter Luck Unicorn teaches that really well. Candyland is more about sequencing in colors. It does that path, but you know, your mileage may vary there. Chutes and Ladders does that very well, but I find the board really can be very confusing for a small child. This is a much clearer, more concise board, which is why I put this above those. Also, you never get sent backwards in this game, so you're not going to be like, oh, thank goodness it's almost over, and then suddenly someone goes back, and you're like, you just went halfway backwards down the board, and now this game is another 10 minutes long. No, you may stall out and not get to move forward on a turn if you roll a cupcake, but you will always move forward. The board is pretty short. There are some chutes ahead, Also, I like the fact that as you collect these gems throughout, you will gather a hoard of them, and then you have to count them, and there's even a counting aid on the back of this board to help small children. Now, I will say with this game, unlike these my first hobby games, which have very large chunky pieces, do not do a game like this if your child is still putting things in their mouth, because this does have very small little crystals in it. So while I recommend this one for toddlers, not toddlers who are prone to putting things in their mouth. This has much smaller pieces than the My First line, which is why it's got that 3 on it instead of the 2. So, but those are my top picks for toddlers. And like I said, in pretty much all of these games, except maybe Spot It, and even there, no, all of these games, there's really no player agency. These are not going to be strategy games. You're not going to find a strategy game that is fun and engaging for a small child, simply because they are trying to learn so many other things. Really planning their turns out ahead is not something they do well. So it's hard, grin and bear it. I think that's why I don't like most little kid games at this age, is because there are no options. It's just, oh, I rolled this, I do this. Oh, I spun this, I pulled this. That is the only option I have, which makes it less fun for us. But the good news is these are short games, which is why I went with Glitter Luck instead of like Candyland. If you're wanting to play games with your child, hoping that they will enjoy games and go on to play more advanced games, you have to start with the basics. So these are the basics that I recommend as more fun for me to play with them, and games that my children really enjoy. So I hope that this list was helpful for you. I hope that I explain things in ways that make sense to how you can relate it to your family and your toddlers if you're playing with very young children. So tune in for the next part of this series, which will be coming out soon, in which I will be talking about the next stage. These will be games after a child has mastered this, and they're going on to play games that will be a little more engaging for you. And so I hope you will be back and you will check that out. Thank you so much, and happy gaming. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. And to see what I've been up to most recently, check out my Instagram. And for all our written reviews, please go to our blog. Thanks so much, and happy gaming.